I've sewn a shirt has lots of little extra seams that make it really different. I played with stripes. It didn't take 2 hours to sew, it took a little longer, but it was really worth it. And I'm really excited to share the details with you. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and I have some woven sewing to share with you today. The shirt that I'm talking about was one I made, I think in February. I made it when I was in the UK. And this is the Rivi shirt from Chalk and Notch. This was a pattern that was released. Suddenly I saw it and I thought, oh wow, I like those seam lines. It looks really different. And so it was a pattern I purchased on the release week and I wanted to sew it. I put this up on a poll on my Patreon page. I do a really detailed sew along every month and it got a lot of the votes. Its design is a loose fit, boxy fit. There's two lengths, can be a shirt or a shirt dress. The sewing doesn't change between them at all. It's just one's longer than the other. They're actually on the same pattern pieces, and the dress is something extra to allow you to walk properly and everything. Has some little slits on the side. It's got a classic collar and collar stand, separate pieces there. It's got a separate placket that you sew onto the center because it's a button down. And where it becomes really cool are these diagonal lines like here on the front, like this. I think that is so awesome. And then at the back you have something similar, but it's not like this, it's more asymmetric. I'm like a bug drawn to light when I see asymmetry and diagonal things. I just love it. So yeah, my eyes were like shining when I was looking at this line art. Drop shoulder style, so it's down here, the armhole is pretty flat looking, and so is the top of the sleeve cup. At the bottom of the sleeve, if you're doing the long sleeve, you have a bound slit, some pleats and cuffs, really classic details. And if you're doing the short sleeve version, then you don't have those details. At the bottom of the sleeve, you can add a cuff. For woven fabrics, there's nothing here that requires your fabric to be drapey. That's just going to be personal preference. And in fact, it would be easier to work with a more structured fabric that's lightweight. Shirting, chambray, cotton lawn, cotton poplin, linen cotton blend, linen rayon blend. I would go to those first. Those would be my first choices. And then if you want to have a harder time dealing with slippery fabric and diagonal shapes, you can go to the drapey rayon twill, rayon challis, rayon crepes, and some tencel and even some silk. I wouldn't choose those for this design. I just think it's going to be easier and you're going to be able to keep the shape of those diagonal seams easier with a more structured fabric. You need fusible interfacing and you need buttons depending on, anywhere from 9 to 14 if it's a shirt or if it's a dress. Because I knew from the get-go I wanted to sew this in stripes because it's just going to show off the details better, and I had 0 stripes in my stash. I had a very small fabric stash while I was in the UK and I needed the fabric fast. So I bought it on amazon.co.uk. I was shocked they sold fabric that basically arrived the next day. So that saved me. I have a stripy linen cotton polyester blend. I'll write here what the composition is. Very appropriate, nice and soft. I'd say light to medium weight. It's not heavy, and it's going to showcase the diagonal seams and perfectly. So I was very happy, with my fabric choice here. I think the only fabric types are going to show these details are stripes or solids. I wouldn't just go and grab a random print with flowers or anything because you're going to do all that work with those diagonal seams that you're not going to be able to see them. I'm not talking about the fabric types. I'm talking about the colors, like what you see. The sizing is from 0 to 30 US. There's 2 cup size options, A, B, or C, D. I plot my measurements down here. I'm a size 14 and I chose a CD cup size option. There is quite a lot of ease here, around 8 inches at the bust. Although it would be like that because it's a drop shoulder, so it's sort of more wide here anyway. Plenty of room, and then down towards the hip around 6. I wouldn't want to size down. I think drop shoulder styles, when you start sizing down, they start fitting really strange around the bust because drop shoulder styles are meant to be looser fit. So just be careful with that. Don't think, oh wow, that's just too much ease, I got to size down. I wouldn't if it's a drop shoulder style. I will keep it as it is and just trust that the designer knows how much ease is going to look good, and I totally agree. There are 2 lengths here, and just doing some flat pattern measurements plus the information on the pattern, I knew I wanted mine 2 inches longer. I also knew I wanted to lower my bust dart, so I'm going to quickly show you how I did that. It was quite easy. although the bust dart was a little bit different than lowering other bust darts. That's why I decided to share that, because it's not as straightforward. I always want to do some flat pattern measurements to figure out if this dart is okay. Now this dart is designed to be sort of right under this diagonal seam, and this is only for the CD cup size. If you're sewing A and B, you're not going to have this dart. Now in the ideal world, if I'm working with stripes, I don't like a dart that's slanted up like this, because it's going to really distort the vertical stripes. You can't just match them up. If you have vertical stripes and a dart that's straight on the grain line, then you can match them up, but I can't really do that with this one. If I move the dart and change the positioning, it's going to affect the seam of the yoke of this front piece. So I'm going to have to keep the slant, unfortunately, and mess up my stripes here on the side. So what I've done here is I've drawn the seam allowance, which is 5/8 on this top piece and this piece right there. So I have my red lines, and then I just place them right on top of each other like it would if it's sewn. And then I put pins there. And then I have this pinned together so I can actually measure down and check out where this dart is. Now, if you see this dart slanted, that tip of the dart is actually not where the apex would be as a reference, because it would be backed away from the apex. So if I drew an imaginary line across the middle of this dart right here and kept going for about 1.5 inches, that's where I'm gonna guesstimate that the apex is, because it's not drawn on the pattern, but in theory that's where it would be. So where that is, I drew a line across, and that's where I'm gonna measure down. Now, because this is a shirt that has a collar stand and it's right next to your neck, I can actually measure from the seam allowance line. You can see the 5/8 line down there in red. And then I can go ahead and measure vertically and check out what the bust height is here, 31 centimeters. I would want mine at 32.5, so I need to lower this by at least 5/8 of an inch. Just to be on the safe side, I like to lower it a little bit more. So let's go with 3/4 of an inch, which is usually what I lower most darts for most patterns. Let's just take this away. So usually when you have a completed front, you would draw a rectangle across like this. But I can't do that because I have no pattern piece over here. So what I'm gonna do to make this easier is from this slanted line here, I'm gonna draw the amount I'm gonna lower the dart by, which is 3/4. So from this top line of the dart, from the upper leg, I'm gonna draw that right here. Let's draw that in green. So I have that line there as a reference. There's gonna be lots of cutting and arts and crafts here. I'm basically gonna cut out this dart. Okay, here is the dart that I cut out. I'm gonna match this upper leg of the dart against that green line that I have there partially. And then this bottom leg of the dart, I'm gonna back it away to match the edge right here so that it matches right here. Remember, I'm lowering the fullest part of the bust, so I'm gonna match that right there. It means my dart is gonna be backed away from the original positioning, but that's fine. Now I'm gonna fill in the gaps here with paper I've just cut, scrap paper. And this is an unconventional way of lowering the dart. It's just the shape you need to adapt to these extra seam lines. And I'm just gonna redraw my dart nicely so you can see it. It's the same exact dart, it's just lower. This is my dart now. This is not my dart anymore. It's the same positioning, the same length, just brought out lower and a little further out so that it matches the side over here. Now when I sew this, I'm actually going to have a tad more space between the seam and the dart, but that's just anatomic for me. That's what matches my bust height, and I'm going to be much happier. This is the bottom of the front. I do have the finished measurements, and I do want my top to be a little bit longer. And so the instructions say just to add it from the hem down, following the same shape. I totally agree. You don't have a shorten and lengthen line up here, but it makes total sense. If you're going to lengthen, and maybe here you were going to be at the high hip, now I'm going to be at the mid hip, it makes sense to follow the same angle right here. So that was all I did. You can see the original length, and I just added my 2 inches down, keeping the same shape. I did that with the front and the back. And because I have a placket that should match, I also lengthened it by the same amount here at the bottom. So these are simple length adjustments. This is a long sleeve. I lengthened it in 3 places. Basically where the paper was joining here on the PDFs. So it means that I'm not deforming it that much. There is just one shorten and lengthen line right here,
but I wanted to lengthen 1.5 inches. I think that's a bit much. So just to make it easier on myself, I added a 1/2 inch here, I added 1/2 inch there, and I added 1/2 inch there, and that's how I get 1.5 inches extra. And this stays quite smooth here on the sides.
All the sewing is on my Patreon page, but I'm still going to share really practical prep work that I did and some thoughts about the collar construction, also about the seam finishes. So everything's designed here for French seams, and it's got the seam allowance for that, which is a huge seam allowance. French seams, what can I say? I'm super picky about French seams. I would only do it with silk, really lightweight rayon, just anything extremely lightweight. You know, I'm just not a big fan of the bulk on the inside of French seams, although it looks beautiful, it's super neat, you know, call it whatever you want. I'm not a fan, and especially with this one where I was going to be super careful about how I was cutting these stripes, because I was cutting each pattern piece individually. I was following a specific stripe. You know, I measured the seam allowance so that my seam would be right along the stripe. That was very important to me. And the only way to get that accuracy with the stripes was to sew regular seams, so I could actually see that my stitch was going along a stripe. If I would have done French seams, that would have been so much more harder to control. And then my seams wouldn't have looked exactly perfect along the stripes. So from the get-go, I was not going to do French seams. Also, the collar construction, the technique is sort of the same. It's just that the way that it's instructed to be interfaced, I was not happy about, because it had you interface the undercollar, which is the piece of the collar that's underneath. That's on the bias. That from sewing about 1 billion shirts, just I know that that is a piece that is not interfaced. And the piece that's interfaced is the upper collar, which is the one you want smooth here. I don't feel paralyzed about not following instructions. You know, if I know that I can do it in another way that's going to make me happy and that I'm not making it up. I've been sewing for a long time. I've sewn a lot of collars and collar stands. I prefer to do it in the way that is going to make me happy. So I did not sew the collar as per the instructions. I will leave you a video showing you how I do it all the time. It's a classic way, so you can see. That's my take on that. No French seams, and I'm interfacing the upper collar and not the under collar. Let me show you the interfacing and the cutting and the pattern pieces, and stay stitching here is not straightforward, so let me show you that.
Here are the pieces that need interfacing for this shirt. This is the upper collar. The original instructions, there's no interfacing on this piece, but I can't do it like that. I'm going to interface mine because I want that crisp, smooth look on the side of the collar that's visible. Collar stand, one is interfaced, one isn't. That is classic. There's nothing different here. These are the placket pieces, and I'm actually following the stripe direction indicated here, so I'm keeping the vertical stripes. In here, the stripes are horizontal for the piece, same as this one. And this is for the cuffs. Now the cuffs had you just interface half of it. So there was a different pattern piece just for interfacing so that you can fuse half. But I like interfacing my whole cuff. I just prefer it that way. Plus my interfacing is very light. It's not going to feel stiff, but I'm going to like the structured look. So I usually don't interface half pieces. Usually when I see that somewhere, I just go ahead and do the whole thing. Same as when some designers have a pattern piece that's smaller for the interfacing so that you don't have interfacing on the seams. I don't enjoy that at all. So I just do the whole thing, and that's absolutely fine. Now there's something different with this one. If I had a random piece of fabric that was a solid or a random print, I would be ready to cut. Block fusing, I've got a slightly larger piece, it's already interfaced, and then I would just cut. But because there are stripes involved, I'm going to do extra things. So for example, I'm going to show you this. This is the upper collar. Here it says grain line stripe direction, and there was a short little arrow right there. I made sure to extend it the whole way through. The distance between the line and this corner is the same as that one, and I just drew it so I could fold it back so I could see. So when I fold it back, I can place this on a stripe, on the same stripe, and I can keep going along that same stripe so that I know my piece is going to look symmetrical. If you eyeball it, you could end up placing it a little off grain and it might end up looking a little bit different. So that's what I'm doing with this one. This is just the upper collar. Block fusing, you know, I cut after fusing, which keeps it the original size and shape that you wanting. You know, if you did this separately and then tried to fuse it back on, you would end up with a whole different shape and size usually, and that translates to pieces not fitting together, and that's just the interfacing sometimes making the fabric shrink and deform. So this is always going to give you a really nice result. Now I'm going to do something similar with this one. You can see I've got the line going all the way across. I'm going to place it across one line, and I'm going to cut these separately. I have one layer that's interfaced, and underneath is not interfaced, but I'm not going to do it like usual where I just cut them together because I want them to be exactly the same. I'm going to cut one first, then use this interfaced piece as the pattern piece to cut the other one to make sure the stripes are all the same. With this piece, which is just a rectangle, I don't just want to place it in 2 layers and cut it because I might not end up cutting along the line. So I'm going to place this along one line here and cut along a line very accurately, and then cut along the other line over here. So I'm going to cut them one by one, and I'm going to do the same with the cuffs over here. So it'll be lengthier, but I just want to make sure that the lines really match up and that I don't end up cutting anything that's not on a line. Plenty of marks to make here. I'm just going to use my friction pen, make a tiny little line. No one's ever going to see this, and I've never had a problem with marks reappearing. So this is the most stable layer. That's the one that I want to use as a template to cut the other piece. So here is my non-interfaced piece. I've got these right sides together, and I'm going to try my best to match up the stripes here. So I can actually see them here on the sides, that they are going to be the same. Okay, I wiggled it a lot, made sure they are right on top of each other, especially in this area here. And now I'm going to cut. And this is going to be the layer that's not interfaced. Stripes always give you extra cutting steps, but it's worth to do this so that it looks as best as it can, because there's nothing worse than stripes not matching up or just looking like you didn't think about it. So I'm just going to continue cutting these. Remember this, I'm going to follow a straight line, following a stripe. That's how I'm going to do it with these 2 rectangle pieces. These are the pattern pieces for the front. This is a lower piece. That is going to be where the placket is going to go. Here is my buster if you're sewing the CD cup size up. That's this diagonal seam. And then this is the upper area that I cut on the bias. So I followed that straight edge along one of the stripes, and that's what's going to be sewn on there, and it's going to give you that cool contrast. Here is the button placket. Vertical stripes as well, very neatly cut. Collar pieces, collar stand, 2 layers, one interfaced, the one on the bottom isn't. Upper collar is interfaced. The under collar is not interfaced, and it's cut on the bias, and it's 2 pieces. It's going to be a center back seam right there. These are the back pieces. I've got them extended. This bottom back piece is cut on the fold, and you can see it has that peak right there. Along those diagonal lines, we're going to have 2 pieces. One is larger, that's going to be on the left. That's going to be on the right. Now I've got all the pieces wrong sides up. I know that because I've got all my little markings, my references with the red friction pen facing up at me, and that's the way it's going to go. So these pieces are going to be sewn first, the back with the smaller piece. Once that one's sewn, then we sew that bigger piece right there. That is the neckline right here. It's completely on the bias. So all these little pieces that have these diagonal seams, we got to be super careful with manipulating them, setting them aside and not touching them until we're ready to sew, and just being super gentle. But super important to stay stitch. That's what's coming next. And it's not going to just be the neckline, it's going to be a little bit more. Here are the sleeve pieces. So because this is a drop shoulder style, the armhole is not the typical armhole. You have a pretty flat sleeve cap, which matches the drop shoulder style. There are notches on the top to match the shoulder seams, double and single. If you find your double notch and just go down, you're going to find the little mark for the slit. It's a couple of inches long. And then along the bottom, you're going to have some pleat marks. I've all done it with a friction pen. This little slit is going to be finished with this binding. I've also cut it right along the stripes here. I cut them one by one, so that's super neat. And here are the cuffs. The cuffs are going to be in another direction, which is great because It would look really messy. You would not be able to match up vertical stripes with all the pleats and all the details. So I think just having them contrast is the best option here. This is my front yoke. It doesn't actually go like that. It goes like this. This is where the placket's going to be, and this is the neckline. You can see this is cut on the bias. Now, if you were working with a regular fabric with whatever print or a solid, you might have cut this on the straight of grain. In that case, your neckline is going to be on the straight of grain, and this is going to be on the bias. So if you didn't cut this on the bias like I did, you will need to stay stitch neckline and then this diagonal bit right here. So it just depends on how you cut it. Now, because I cut this on a bias, this actual area here is on the straight of grain, so I don't need to stay stitch that. I'm going to concentrate on the areas that I think will stretch out if I don't do it, which is this area where the placket's going to go, and the neckline here. So this is going to be for the front. But remember, if you cut this on the straight of grain, then this area is going to be on the bias, and then you need to stay stitch that. I'm going from the shoulder into the center here. We're going to have a collar and collar stand later, so it's important to conserve this neckline. The neckline is completely cut on the bias, so in my case, it could really deform. I'm going to repeat on the other front, and then we'll look at the back. These are the two back pieces. Now, for this larger piece, you can see my neckline is completely cut on the bias, but this area is not. So I'm going to focus on stitching just the neckline here on this large piece. And I'm also going to this shoulder area because it's also cut on the bias. I want this to match my front shoulder yoke piece. So for this larger piece, I'm doing neckline and this. If you cut this on the straight of grain, then you would also need to stay stitch this area here, probably not the shoulder. Now for the smaller piece, this is completely on the bias here, so I want to stay stitch that for sure. That's all. That's the only thing I'm going to stay stitch for this smaller piece. For the neckline, I'm going from the shoulder into the little mark for the center back and then flipping the fabric and going from the shoulder into the center. That's to keep it symmetrical. If you do it all in one go, it's probably not going to end up symmetrical. It'll end up lopsided. Another area I'm going to stay stitch is this diagonal bit of the front. Ignore that. I've just pinned my bust dart. What I'm going to pin onto here is not cut on the bias. There might be a discrepancy. I'm going the extra mile and doing a little bit of extra stay stitching right here. It never hurt anyone. And I'm going to do the same with the top of the back piece.
It just started to rain, so I had to get under this little roof here. Let me show you my shirt. Here it is. I love the distance between these stripes. They're thin stripes. They're my favorite type. I'm not drawn to thicker, more contrasty type of stripes. And the dark gray with the white here is just perfect. You can see my diagonal seam follows one specific stripe right there perfectly. So I wouldn't have been able to achieve that if I had French seams, because you're doing two seams, you can't really know and see on the other side. So yeah, there is my bust dart that distorts the stripes right here. It's not that noticeable actually when I wear it, so I'm glad that that is there for my cup size. My collar and collar stand, this upper collar is the one that I interface. The under collar that is cut on the bias here is not interfaced. In the instructions, it's the opposite, and that was what I didn't want to do. So I did it in the way that I like to do it. I didn't make it up. And then right here at the back, we have this bigger piece and this smaller piece. These are asymmetric pieces, so when you cut these out, you need to have the fabric right sides up so that everything turns out correctly, or else it's going to turn out the wrong way. All the other pieces, you can cut them however you want, with the wrong sides up or whatever. But these two have to be cut right sides up. You can see there and there. So nice. I stay stitched any diagonal thing that was all around this area because I did not want this stretching out and things not fitting, especially around the neckline. It could have stretched out real bad. The button placket is a totally separate piece, but I managed to match up the stripes perfectly along here, so you can't even see that the button placket is there. This is a type of button placket that is sewn on the wrong side and then flipped over to the right side and then top stitched. I took my sweet time. Let me tell you how long that took. But I'm so happy because you can't even tell that it's there. Here you can tell, but not on this area. The little slit right here, I have a video showing you how to do that. I'll link it up for you. A few pleats and then into the cuff. I interfaced my whole cuff because I just like that structure there. And the sleeve itself was very easy to set in. I mean, yeah, it's just one-to-one, really easy. My seams on the inside going rogue, just serged and pressed open, no French seams. Thank you very much. I'm so happy with my regular seams. I usually am very happy with my regular seams. I don't feel like I'm missing out because I go rogue and I don't do the French seams. I feel absolutely fine and I can sleep at night without any worries. I'm super proud of how this turned out. It's going to be one of my best shirts. It's just so striking, and I've done very simple styling because it's wider, more voluminous. I have something fitted at the bottom. So let's see. Check out my Rivi shirt from Chalk and Notch. It's a stripy little wonder shirt that I really enjoyed sewing while I was in the UK still. It's got a lot of diagonal features and really interesting cut lines that you're going to see up closer. I did lengthen mine by 2 inches and this is a 14 with a CD cup size option. These are linen, cotton, polyester blend fabric and I love it. Perfect because it's a little more voluminous. I have it paired with a really fitted denim pencil skirt. Like the length, I think it's balanced here. It's the way I feel good. Check out the comfy amount of ease. I'm very glad I lengthened it. I think the original would have been too short for me just because it's boxy. I don't know. I like it like this and I'm much happier. Up closer, you can see the button placket. I matched up the stripes perfectly so you can't even see that there is another pattern piece right there. My buttons are 6 centimeters apart, 2 3/8 of an inch. Right here, there is a bust that's diagonal there. I did lower that by 3/4 of an inch and it matches my bust height perfectly. The bottom of the sleeve has the classic feature of the little bound slit, which I prefer a lot more than the tower placket. It's so much more delicate. Some little pleats right over here and the cuff, I decided to go with a single button right. My sleeve is 1.5 inches longer and I'm glad I did that because this is how I like my sleeves. I like them to cover my hand partially. That's always personal preference. Now check out these diagonal lines right here. I love that. So this is cut on the bias so that you can get this effect. I cut these pieces individually so that the stripes would match exactly. The stripe is really straight. I took my time, my sweet time to cut this out. Collar and collar stand right here, classic, really nice. So there is the armhole, there is the sleeve. So you're really not going to have narrow or wide shoulder adjustment problems with this style. It's just very easy to sew and to wear. It's part of the style. And at the back, we have those diagonal lines as well. There's one larger piece, there's one smaller piece. I also cut those on the bias. I always enjoy sewing collar stands and collars. I've sewn so many over the years. I've got the steps down. I could probably sew them in my sleep because I've done it so many times, and you could get to that point too if you sew this a lot of times. I think it always looks really nice. And I can button up and down as much as I want. I would never close it up all the way, although it's not tight, it wouldn't feel uncomfortable. It's just, I don't feel good with buttons all the way up. I loved sewing this. I took my sweet time. This one took me days to make, and I'm not kidding. Just the cutting phase took a couple of days. I wanted to be as best as it could be, and it's just great. I would make this again, only with stripes or solids. I think that would showcase all these diagonal features. Otherwise, with a print, you would never see them. I love the design, everything. The fit is just great. Really enjoyed sewing it. Go have a look. I'm not an affiliate with Chalk and Notch. I have tested for them in the past, but I don't receive commissions, nothing like that. It's just a pattern that I liked, and I wanted to sew right away because when I like something, I get really excited, and this is a pattern that got me really excited. So I'm very happy with it. The lovely people that are on my Patreon page have already seen this a couple of months ago, and now you got to see a little summary and how it turned out. I'm super happy to share. This is so amazing. That's all from me. Next time you see me, I'm going to show something really fun and neat, easy as well. See you then. Bye.